The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the dusty town of Greeley, Colorado, and Fiona Garrett pressed her trembling hand against the worn leather seat, trying to steady herself as much as calm the terror racing through her heart. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride, and now she faced a reckoning that could destroy everything before it even began. The letter, tucked inside her worn carpetbag, had taken her 3 attempts and the help of a sympathetic schoolteacher to compose, and every word of courtship that had passed between her and Nathan Porter had been written by someone else's hand. She could not read, could not write, and in mere moments, she would have to tell the cowboy who had sent for her that the woman he expected was nothing more than an illusion. The driver opened the door, and Fiona stepped down into the September sunshine of 1878, her simple green traveling dress already coated with the fine dust that seemed to cover everything in this frontier town. Greeley was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings lining a wide dirt street, with the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance like jagged teeth against the bright blue sky. Horses stood tied to hitching posts, and a few townspeople paused in their daily routines to stare at the newcomer. "Miss Garrett." The voice was deep and hesitant, and Fiona turned to see a tall man approaching from the shade of the general store. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of warm honey. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though at this moment he looked as nervous as she felt. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and he twisted that hat in his hands as he came closer. "Mr. Porter," Fiona managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nathan, please," he said, and a small smile crossed his face. "I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," Fiona admitted, "but I am grateful to be here safely." Nathan gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "I thought we could go to the boarding house first. Mrs. Henderson has a room ready for you. We can talk there, get to know each other proper before making any decisions about the wedding." Relief flooded through Fiona. She had worried that he might expect an immediate marriage, giving her no chance to explain her deception. That would be very kind. He loaded her single bag into the wagon with ease, then helped her up onto the seat with a gentleness that surprised her. His hands were calloused and strong, but his touch was careful, respectful. As they drove through town, he pointed out the various establishments: the church, the schoolhouse, the saloon, the bank. Fiona nodded and smiled, committing everything to memory since she could not make notes the way an educated woman might. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town," Nathan explained. "Nothing fancy, but I have a good herd building and the land is fertile enough for hay and some crops. The house needs a woman's touch, I will admit. I built it myself 3 years ago, and I am better with cattle than I am with curtains and such." "I am sure it is fine," Fiona said, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. Every word he spoke made her feel worse about her secret. He had expectations, dreams of a partner who could help him build a life, and she was coming to him broken, incomplete. The boarding house was a tidy 2-story building painted white, with a small garden out front where late summer flowers still bloomed. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s who fussed over Fiona immediately, declaring that she looked half-starved and needed a proper meal. "You let her rest, Nathan Porter," Mrs. Henderson scolded. "The poor dear has been traveling for weeks. You can come calling tomorrow for dinner, and the 2 of you can talk then." Nathan agreed readily enough, though Fiona caught him glancing at her with an expression she could not quite read. Hope, perhaps, mixed with the same nervousness she felt. After he left, Mrs. Henderson showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor with a window overlooking the street. "He is a good man," Mrs. Henderson said as she set fresh towels on the washstand. "A bit quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but honest as the day is long. Lost his parents to fever 5 years back, and he has been running that ranch alone ever since. I think he just got lonely out there." "He seems very kind," Fiona said carefully. "You rest now, and I will bring you up some supper later." Mrs. Henderson patted her arm and left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone at last, Fiona sank onto the bed and let the tears come. She had held them back for so long, through the entire journey west, but now they flowed freely. What had she been thinking, coming all this way? She should have stayed in Boston, should have continued working in the textile mill, despite the terrible conditions and the pittance they paid. At least there she could hide her shame, blend in with hundreds of other workers who were too exhausted to notice or care if she could read the signs on the walls. But the mill had been closing, laying off workers by the dozens as the economic depression tightened its grip on the nation. Fiona had faced the prospect of true destitution, and when her roommate had shown her the advertisement for mail-order brides, she had seen it as her only chance. The school teacher, Miss Adelaide, had been kind enough to write her response and the subsequent letters, never judging, always patient. But Miss Adelaide was 2,000 miles away now, and Fiona was on her own. She wiped her eyes and moved to the window, watching the activity on the street below. A group of cowboys rode past, their horses kicking up dust. A woman with 2 children entered the general store. Greeley seemed like a decent town, the kind of place where a person could build a life if given the chance. But would Nathan Porter give her that chance once he knew the truth? That night, Fiona barely slept. She rehearsed what she would say 100 different ways, but none of them sounded right. By the time morning came, she felt sick with dread. Mrs. Henderson brought breakfast and insisted Fiona eat every bite, then helped her into her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had been her mother's before she died. The older woman chattered on about the town gossip, clearly trying to ease Fiona's nerves, and it helped a little. By the time Nathan arrived at noon, Fiona had at least stopped shaking. Dinner was a quiet affair with Mrs. Henderson serving roasted chicken and vegetables while keeping up a steady stream of conversation. Nathan answered politely, but kept his attention on Fiona, asking her questions about her journey, about Boston, about her family. Fiona answered as best she could, explaining that her parents had both died, that she had been working in the mills, that she had wanted a fresh start in the West. "I understand wanting a new beginning," Nathan said. "That is part of why I wrote to the marriage broker. I suppose I could have courted one of the local girls, but most of them grew up here, have families and histories. I like the idea of starting fresh with someone, building something new together." "That sounds wonderful," Fiona said, and meant it. But her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must surely hear it. After the meal, Nathan suggested they take a walk. The afternoon was warm but pleasant, with a breeze that carried the scent of sage from the surrounding plains. They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land, and stood looking out at the vast expanse of territory stretching toward the mountains. "It is so different from Boston," Fiona said. "Everything there is crowded together, buildings pressed up against each other, people everywhere. Here there is so much space." "Does it frighten you?" Nathan asked. "The emptiness?" "A little," she admitted. "But it is also beautiful. I have never seen anything like those mountains." "They are something special," Nathan agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I want to be honest with you, Fiona. I know we have only been writing for a few months and we are still strangers in many ways. I do not expect you to marry me right away if you are not comfortable. I am happy to give you time to get to know me to be sure this is what you want." His kindness made what she had to do even harder. Fiona took a deep breath, gathering every bit of courage she possessed. "Nathan, there is something I must tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning, but I was afraid." He turned to face her, concern creasing his brow. "What is it?" "The letters," Fiona said, her voice shaking. "The ones I sent you. I did not write them. I cannot write, I cannot read, I never could. My family was poor, and I had to work from the time I was small. There was no money for school, no time for learning. I had a friend help me with the correspondence, but I lied to you, and I am so sorry. I understand if you want to send me back to Boston." The words tumbled out in a rush, and when she finished, she could not bear to look at him. She stared at the ground, waiting for his anger, his disappointment, his rejection. The silence stretched so long that she finally forced herself to glance up. Nathan was watching her with an expression she could not read, his honey-colored eyes intense. "You cannot read at all?" he asked quietly. "No," Fiona whispered. "Not a single word." "And you came all the way out here anyway, knowing you would have to tell me?" She nodded, fighting back tears. "I should have told you sooner. I know that. But I needed to get away from Boston, and I thought maybe once you met me you might understand. But I know it is a terrible deception, and I am sorry." Nathan was quiet for another long moment, and Fiona's heart sank further with each passing second. Then he said, "Well, then I will teach you." Fiona's head snapped up. "What?" "I will teach you to read," Nathan said, and now there was a small smile on his face. "It is not an impossible thing. My mother taught me when I was a boy, and I have kept up with it over the years. I am no schoolmaster, but I know enough to pass it on." "You are not angry?" Fiona asked, hardly daring to believe it. "Angry? No." Nathan shook his head. "Disappointed that you felt you had to lie, perhaps, but not angry. I understand why you did it. And honestly, Fiona, not being able to read does not make you any less of a person. There are plenty of good people on this frontier who cannot read or write. It is not a measure of your worth." "But you wanted an educated bride," Fiona protested. "You said so in your advertisement." "I wanted someone who could help run a household, keep accounts, maybe teach our children someday," Nathan said. "But those are skills that can be learned. What I really wanted was someone honest and kind, someone willing to work hard and build a life with me. From your letters, or your friends' letters on your behalf, I got the sense that you are that kind of person. Was I wrong?" "No," Fiona said quickly. "I want all those things. I want to work hard, to have a family, to build something good. I just never thought anyone would want me if they knew the truth." "Well, now you know different," Nathan said gently. He reached out and took her hand, and the warmth of his touch sent a spark through her. "If you are willing to stay, if you are willing to try, then I am willing to teach you. We can take things slow, get to know each other proper. And when you are ready, if you decide you want to marry me, then we will make it official." Fiona felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. "You would really do that? Take the time to teach me?" "I would," Nathan said firmly. "Starting tomorrow, if you are willing. We will begin with the basics and we will work our way up. By the time winter comes, I bet you will be reading better than half the folks in this town." "I do not know what to say," Fiona whispered. "Say you will stay," Nathan said. "Say you will give this a chance." "I will stay," Fiona said, and she squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Nathan. You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I do," he said softly. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn, to grow. And everyone deserves a second chance when they make a mistake. You were brave to tell me the truth, Fiona. That took courage." They stood there for a while longer, holding hands and watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. For the first time since leaving Boston, Fiona felt a flicker of real hope. The next morning, Nathan arrived at the boarding house carrying a leather satchel. Mrs. Henderson showed them to the small parlor, giving Fiona an encouraging wink as she left them alone. Nathan opened the satchel and pulled out a worn children's primer, a slate, and some chalk. "I stopped by the schoolhouse and borrowed these from Miss Baker, the teacher. She was happy to help when I explained the situation." Fiona felt her cheeks warm. "You told her?" "I told her I had a friend who wanted to learn to raid," Nathan said. "I did not give your name. Your privacy is your own, Fiona. You can tell people or not tell them as you see fit." "Thank you," Fiona said, relaxing slightly. She looked at the materials spread on the table between them. "Where do we begin?" "With the alphabet," Nathan said. He opened the primer to the first page, where large letters were printed along with simple pictures. "These are the building blocks of everything else. Once you know these, the rest will come easier." He started with the letter A, showing her how to form it with the chalk on the slate, explaining the sound it made. Fiona watched carefully, then tried to copy what he had done. Her first attempt was shaky and uneven, but Nathan encouraged her to try again. "Better," he said after her third try. "You have a steady hand. That will help." They worked through the first 5 letters of the alphabet that morning, with Nathan patiently correcting her mistakes and praising her successes. Fiona found herself surprised by how good it felt to finally be learning these mysterious symbols that had always seemed like a locked door she could never open. Nathan was a patient teacher, never showing frustration when she struggled, always willing to explain something again in a different way if she did not understand. When Mrs. Henderson brought them lunch, Fiona realized with surprise that several hours had passed. Her hand ached from gripping the chalk, and her head felt full of new information, but she was also excited in a way she had not felt in years. "That is enough for today," Nathan said, carefully packing away the materials. "You do not want to overwhelm yourself on the first day. We will work on the rest of the alphabet over the next few sessions." "When will you come again?" Fiona asked, trying not to sound too eager. "Tomorrow, if that suits you," Nathan said. "I have some work to do at the ranch in the mornings, but I can be here by afternoon." "That would be perfect," Fiona said. As Nathan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "You did well today, Fiona. You should be proud of yourself." "I could not have done it without you," she said. "You are the one doing the work," Nathan pointed out. "I am just showing you the way." Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Nathan would arrive each afternoon, and they would spend 2 or 3 hours working on reading and writing. By the end of the first week, Fiona had mastered the entire alphabet and could write her name with only a little hesitation. By the end of the second week, she was beginning to sound out simple words, but the lessons became about more than just reading. As they worked together, they talked, sharing stories about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Fiona learned that Nathan's parents had been farmers in Illinois before coming to Colorado, that his father had died of pneumonia during a harsh winter, and his mother had followed 6 months later from a fever. Nathan had been just 21, suddenly responsible for the ranch and a herd of cattle he barely knew how to manage. "Those first 2 years were the hardest of my life," Nathan admitted one afternoon as they took a break from studying. They had taken to walking after their lessons, strolling through town or along the nearby creek. "I made every mistake you can imagine. Lost cattle to disease because I did not recognize the symptoms in time, nearly went broke buying feed during a drought, got cheated by a buyer from Denver. But I learned and I kept at it, and eventually things started to turn around." "You must miss them terribly," Fiona said. "Your parents." "Every day," Nathan said quietly, "but I try to live in a way that would make them proud. That is what keeps me going." Fiona understood that sentiment deeply. Her own mother had died when she was 15, worn down by years of factory work and poverty. Her father had followed 2 years later, his lungs destroyed by the cotton dust in the mill. She had no siblings, no other family, which was part of what had made the decision to leave Boston easier but also lonelier. "I think they would be proud," Fiona said. "You have built a good life here, Nathan. That takes strength and determination." "Some days it does not feel like much," Nathan admitted. "A small ranch, a simple house. There are men in this territory with twice what I have, bigger herds, fancier spreads. But it is yours," Fiona pointed out. "You built it with your own hands, your own sweat. That means something." Nathan looked at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. "You have a way of seeing the good in things, Fiona. I like that about you." As the lessons continued, Fiona found herself falling in love not just with the magic of reading, but with the man who was teaching her. Nathan was kind and patient, yes, but he was also funny in a quiet, dry way that often caught her off guard. He told stories about his cattle with the same affection other men reserved for their children, giving them names and personalities. He noticed small things, like when Fiona was frustrated and needed a break, or when she was excited about her progress and wanted to push further. And he was handsome, though Fiona tried not to dwell on that too much. She found herself noticing the way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned over to check her work, the strength in his hands, the warmth in his eyes when he smiled at her. One afternoon in early October, they were sitting by the creek, taking a break from a particularly challenging lesson on blending letter sounds. The cottonwood trees along the water had turned golden, and leaves drifted down around them like lazy snowflakes. "Can I ask you something?" Fiona said hesitantly. "Anything," Nathan replied. "Why did you never marry before now? You said you could have courted local girls." Nathan was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow past. "I suppose I never met anyone who felt right. After my parents died, I was so focused on saving the ranch that I did not have time for courting. And then the years just seemed to slip by. I would go to dances now and then, talk to the available women, but it always felt forced somehow. Like we were both just going through the motions because it was expected." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the creek. "I think I wanted something more. A real connection, a partnership. Someone who chose to be with me, not just because we happened to live in the same town, but because we truly wanted to build a life together." "Is that what you think we have?" Fiona asked softly. "A real connection?" Nathan turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I am starting to hope so. These past few weeks, getting to know you, watching you work so hard to learn, talking with you every day, I find myself looking forward to our lessons more than anything else. Not because I enjoy teaching, though I do, but because it means I get to spend time with you." Fiona felt her heart racing. "I feel the same way. When you are not here, I find myself counting the hours until you will arrive. And it is not just about the reading anymore, though that is wonderful. It is you, Nathan. I am falling in love with you." The words were out before she could stop them, and for a moment she panicked, worried she had revealed too much too soon. But then Nathan reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am falling in love with you too, Fiona," he said. "I have been for a while now, but I was not sure if it was proper to say so. We were supposed to be taking things slow, getting to know each other." "We have been getting to know each other," Fiona pointed out. "Every day, for hours at a time. I feel like I know you better than I have known anyone." "Then maybe it is time we talked about making this official," Nathan said. "I know we originally said we would wait, but I do not see any reason to keep waiting if we both know what we want. Fiona Garrett, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy flooded through Fiona like sunlight. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hand. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan Porter." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Fiona did not want to pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "We should probably tell Mrs. Henderson," Nathan said. "She will want to help plan the wedding." "She will be thrilled," Fiona agreed. "She has been asking me every day if you have proposed yet." They walked back to town holding hands, and when they told Mrs. Henderson the news, the older woman let out a whoop of joy and immediately started making plans. The wedding would be in 2 weeks, she declared, which would give her time to help Fiona make a proper dress and to spread the word through town. The ceremony would be at the church, with a reception to follow at the boarding house. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Fiona continued her reading lessons with Nathan, but they also spent time preparing for their marriage. Nathan took her to see the ranch, a sprawling property with a sturdy log house, a barn, several outbuildings and pastures where his cattle grazed peacefully. The house was indeed sparse, as he had warned, but Fiona could see its potential. With curtains on the windows and rugs on the floors, some pictures on the walls and care in the garden, it would be a real home. "I know it is not much," Nathan said as they stood in the main room, which served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all in one. "It is perfect," Fiona said honestly. "It is ours, or it will be soon. That is all that matters. Mrs. Henderson enlisted the help of several other women in town to sew Fiona's wedding dress. A simple but lovely creation in cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Fiona had never owned anything so fine, and when she tried it on for the first time, she nearly cried at how beautiful it made her feel. The night before the wedding, as Fiona was preparing for bed, Mrs. Henderson knocked on her door and entered carrying a small wooden box. "I wanted to give you this," the older woman said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It was my mother's, and she gave it to me when I married Mr. Henderson. I never had daughters to pass it on to, and I would be honored if you would wear it tomorrow." She opened the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a flower. It was clearly old but well cared for, and Fiona was touched by the gesture. "Mrs. Henderson, I could not possibly," she protested. "Nonsense," the older woman said firmly. "You are like a daughter to me now, dear, and Nathan is like a son. I am so happy to see you two finding each other. Now let me help you put this on so we can see how it looks with your dress." The wedding took place on a crisp October afternoon, with the church full of townspeople who had come to wish the couple well. Fiona walked down the aisle in her new dress, wearing Mrs. Henderson's necklace, her hand trembling slightly as she carried a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers. But when she saw Nathan waiting at the altar, looking handsome in a new suit with his hair neatly combed, her nervousness faded. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows before Reverend Matthews, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When Nathan slid the simple gold band onto her finger, Fiona felt tears of happiness sliding down her cheeks. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. The reception at the boarding house was a lively affair, with food and music and dancing. Fiona met what seemed like half the town, from the banker Mr. Sullivan to the seamstress Miss Porter, who turned out to be a distant cousin of Nathan's, to the gruff but kind-hearted blacksmith Mr. Jensen. Everyone was warm and welcoming, and Fiona began to feel like she might actually belong in this frontier town. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Nathan and Fiona said their goodbyes and climbed into his wagon for the ride to the ranch. Fiona felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. They had talked about many things over the past weeks, but they had not discussed the wedding night in any detail. She trusted Nathan, but she was still inexperienced and uncertain. As if sensing her nervousness, Nathan reached over and took her hand. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for, Fiona. I know this is all new and probably a bit overwhelming. We can take our time." "I want to be a proper wife to you," Fiona said quietly. "I am just a little nervous." "That is natural," Nathan said gently. "I am a bit nervous too, if I am being honest, but we will figure it out together, just like everything else." When they arrived at the ranch, Nathan helped her down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, scooped her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" Fiona laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Nathan said with a grin. "It is tradition." He carried her inside and set her down carefully in the main room, which looked different than it had during her earlier visit. Someone, probably Nathan, had cleaned everything thoroughly, and there were fresh flowers in a jar on the table. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting warm light over everything. "Welcome home, Mrs. Porter," Nathan said softly. "Mrs. Porter," Fiona repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." They spent the evening talking by the fire, neither one quite ready to head to the bedroom just yet. Nathan told her about his plans for expanding the herd in the spring, and Fiona shared her hopes for starting a vegetable garden. Eventually, though, the hour grew late and Nathan stood, offering her his hand. "Come on," he said gently. "Let me show you our room." The bedroom was small but cozy, with a handmade bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Nathan had placed more flowers on the small dresser, and the thoughtfulness of that gesture made Fiona's heart swell. What followed was tender and slow, with Nathan showing her nothing but patience and gentleness. He helped her out of her dress, praising her beauty in whispered words that made her blush. They came together with a natural ease that surprised Fiona, and afterward, as she lay in his arms, she felt more complete than she had ever thought possible. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, stroking her hair. "More than all right," Fiona said. "I am happy, Nathan, truly happy. So am I," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "So am I." In the weeks that followed, Fiona settled into her new life as a rancher's wife. She threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains from fabric Nathan bought in town, arranging furniture, starting to plan her spring garden. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to do laundry in the big tub out back, to churn butter and bake bread. Some tasks came easily, others required practice and patience, but she approached everything with determination. And through it all, Nathan continued to teach her to read. They worked together each evening after supper, with Fiona's skills growing steadily. By November, she could read simple sentences. By December, she was making her way through basic stories in the primer. Her handwriting, too, improved with practice, until she could write letters that were shaky but legible. One cold evening in January, as snow fell softly outside the windows, Fiona surprised Nathan by reading an entire passage from the newspaper without stumbling over any words. When she finished, she looked up to find him watching her with an expression of such pride and love that it took her breath away. "You did it," he said. "You are reading, Fiona, really reading." "Because of you," Fiona said, closing the newspaper. "You gave me this gift, Nathan. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself." "You always had it in you," Nathan said. "I just helped you unlock it." He pulled her into his arms, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the wind howled across the prairie, but inside they were warm and safe and happy. Winter passed slowly, as winters do on the high plains. There were days when the snow piled so high they could barely get the barn door open. Days when the cold was so intense that they had to bring some of the younger animals into the barn's warmest section to keep them from freezing. But there were also moments of beauty. Sunrises that painted the snow-covered land in shades of pink and gold. Evenings by the fire with Nathan reading aloud while Fiona followed along in her own book. Nights when they lay tangled together under thick quilts, talking and laughing and making love. By the time spring arrived, Fiona was reading at a level that would have made any schoolteacher proud. She could write letters without help, keep household accounts in a ledger, and even read sections of the Bible aloud at the informal Sunday gatherings some of the local ranch families held when the weather made it too difficult to get to town for church. With the spring thaw came new life on the ranch. Several of the cows gave birth to healthy calves, and Fiona delighted in watching the youngsters gambol through the pastures. She started her garden, planting seeds Nathan had ordered from a catalog, and spent hours each day tending the emerging plants. It was during this time that Fiona realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another few weeks to be certain, then told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Nathan turned to her, his eyes wide. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor," Fiona said. "All the signs are there. I have been feeling ill in the mornings, and I am several weeks late." A slow smile spread across Nathan's face. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Fiona asked, though she could see the answer in his expression. "Happy." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Fiona, I am more than happy. I am overjoyed, terrified maybe, but overjoyed." They went to town the following week to see Dr. Harrison, who confirmed what Fiona already knew. She was indeed pregnant, probably about 3 months along, which meant the baby would arrive sometime in the autumn. Mrs. Henderson was thrilled by the news and immediately began planning, insisting that Fiona must have proper baby clothes and blankets. The older woman organized a quilting bee, bringing together several of the ranch wives and town women to create a beautiful baby quilt. Fiona found herself welcomed into this circle of women, listening to their stories and advice about childbirth and motherhood. As her belly grew through the summer, Fiona continued to read and write, keeping a journal now about her daily experiences, her thoughts and feelings about becoming a mother. Nathan read her entries sometimes, with her permission, and always seemed moved by her words. "You have a gift for this," he told her one evening after reading about her description of watching a thunderstorm roll across the prairie. "The way you write, it is like I am seeing things through your eyes." "I had a good teacher," Fiona said, smiling at him. "Besides, I have a lot to write about. This life, this place, you. It would be a shame not to record it." In late September, as the leaves on the cottonwoods began to turn gold again, Fiona went into labor. Nathan rode hard to fetch Mrs. Henderson and Dr. Harrison, and the two arrived just as the contractions were becoming intense. What followed were hours of pain and struggle, but also of Nathan holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when Mrs. Henderson suggested he might be more comfortable waiting in the other room. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born, a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and powerful lungs. Dr. Harrison placed him in Fiona's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face with a sense of awe so profound. It brought tears to her eyes. "He is beautiful," Nathan breathed, sitting on the edge of the bed beside them. "Fiona, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" Fiona asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Nathan said, "What about James?" "After my father, James Henry Porter." "James Henry," Fiona repeated. "I love it. Hello, little James. Welcome to the world." The baby squinted up at her as if trying to focus on her face, and Fiona felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it almost frightened her. This tiny person was depending on her and Nathan for everything, and she was determined not to let him down. The weeks after James's birth were exhausting but joyful. Fiona learned to nurse him, to change his cloths, to soothe him when he cried in the night. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, taking turns walking with James when he was fussy, singing to him in a soft voice, marveling at each tiny change as the baby grew. When James was 6 weeks old, they took him to town to be baptized at the church. Half the town turned out for the event, eager to meet the newest member of the community. Mrs. Henderson stood as godmother, and Dr. Harrison as godfather, both of them beaming with pride as Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. After the service, as they were preparing to head back to the ranch, Mrs. Henderson pulled Fiona aside. "I want you to know how proud I am of you, dear," the older woman said. "When you first arrived in Greeley, you were so frightened and uncertain, and now look at you. A confident wife and mother, able to read and write, managing a household. You have come so far." "I could not have done it without you," Fiona said, hugging her, "or without Nathan. Everyone here has been so kind, so welcoming." "That is what community is for," Mrs. Henderson said. "We help each other, support each other. And you and Nathan have become an important part of this community." As they drove back to the ranch, with James sleeping peacefully in Fiona's arms, she reflected on Mrs. Henderson's words. A year ago, she had been a frightened, desperate woman stepping off a stagecoach, certain that her inability to read would doom any chance at happiness. Now she was surrounded by love, part of a community, mother to a beautiful son, and wife to a man who had seen her not as broken but as someone worth teaching, worth investing in, worth loving. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, glancing over at her. "About how much has changed," Fiona said. "About how different my life is now compared to a year ago. Good different or bad different," Nathan teased. "The best different," Fiona said firmly. "I never imagined I could be this happy, Nathan, that I could have all of this." "You deserve every bit of it," Nathan said. "You worked hard for it, Fiona. Everything you have, you earned." As the ranch house came into view, Fiona felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. This was home. Not just the house and the land, but the life she and Nathan had built together, the family they had created. The years that followed were good ones. James grew from a baby into a curious toddler, then into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch. Fiona's reading and writing skills continued to improve until they were indistinguishable from those of someone who had been educated from childhood. She became known in the community for her beautiful letters and for her willingness to help others who, like her, had never learned to read. When James was 3, Fiona gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Marie. The little girl had her mother's red gold hair and her father's honey-colored eyes, and she wrapped both parents around her tiny finger from the moment she arrived. 2 years after Rose came another son, Thomas, who was quieter than his older brother but just as beloved. Nathan expanded the ranch steadily over the years, buying adjacent land when it became available, increasing his herd, building new outbuildings and corrals. But he always made time for his family, for evening reading sessions where all 3 children would pile onto the bed while their parents read stories, for Sunday dinners that often included Mrs. Henderson and other friends from town, for teaching his sons about ranching and his daughter about whatever she wanted to learn. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Fiona with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover in gold letters. "For your writing," he explained as she ran her fingers over the smooth leather. "You have filled up 3 journals already with your stories and observations. I thought you deserved a special one." Fiona opened the journal to find Nathan had written an inscription on the first page. "To my dearest Fiona, who proved that it is never too late to learn, to grow, to become who you were always meant to be. With all my love, Nathan." Tears filled her eyes as she read the words. "Nathan, this is beautiful. Thank you." "Thank you," Nathan said, pulling her close. "For taking a chance on a lonely cowboy. For being brave enough to tell me the truth when you could have kept lying. For working so hard to learn. For being such an amazing mother to our children. For making this house a home. For everything, Fiona." They kissed, a kiss that held 10 years of love and partnership and shared struggles and triumphs. When they broke apart, Fiona rested her forehead against his. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat," she whispered. "Every mile of that journey west, every moment of fear and uncertainty, because it brought me here to you, to this life. I love you, Nathan Porter." "I love you too, Fiona Porter," Nathan murmured. "More than I ever thought possible." As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They faced challenges together. A harsh winter that killed several head of cattle, a drought that lasted 2 summers, James breaking his arm falling from a tree, Rose getting a terrible fever that had them terrified for a week. But they also celebrated triumphs. Nathan being elected to the town council, Fiona starting a small school in their home for ranch children who lived too far from town to attend regular classes, James winning a blue ribbon at the county fair for his calf, Rose learning to read at age 4, faster than any of her brothers, Thomas showing an unexpected talent for drawing that led to his sketches being displayed in the general store. On a warm evening in late summer, when Fiona was 42 and Nathan was 45, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Their children were grown now, James working the ranch alongside his father, Rose away at teaching college in Denver, and Thomas apprenticed to a printer in Cheyenne, hoping to become a newspaper illustrator. "Can you believe it has been 22 years since I stepped off that stage coach?" Fiona mused, rocking gently in her chair. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Nathan said. "Other times it feels like you have always been here, like I cannot remember what life was like before you." "We have built a good life," Fiona said, "better than I ever dreamed possible when I left Boston." "We have," Nathan agreed. He reached over and took her hand, his touch as warm and comforting as it had been that first day by the creek. "And we are not done yet. We still have years ahead of us, new adventures to have, grandchildren to spoil eventually." Fiona laughed. "Grandchildren. That is a terrifying thought." "A wonderful thought," Nathan corrected. "Can you imagine little versions of James and Rose and Thomas running around?" "They will probably be just as much trouble as their parents were," Fiona said, but she was smiling. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, they remained on the porch, holding hands, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of knowing someone completely. Fiona thought about that frightened young woman who had arrived in Greeley so long ago, convinced that her inability to read made her worthless, and she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. Nathan had given her more than just the ability to read and write. He had given her confidence, purpose, love, and family. He had seen her potential when she could not see it herself, and he had patiently helped her unlock it. In return, she had given him a home filled with warmth and laughter, children to carry on his legacy, and a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, echoing a question he had posed countless times over the years. About how grateful I am, Fiona said. About how one moment of courage, one decision to tell you the truth instead of continuing to lie, changed everything. If I had not confessed that day, if you had sent me away, my life would be so different. I could never have sent you away, Nathan said. Even then, after knowing you for just a few days, I could see there was something special about you. Your inability to read was just a small obstacle, easily overcome. The person you are underneath, your kindness and strength and determination, that was what mattered. You saw me, Fiona said softly. When I could not even see myself, you saw me. And I am still seeing you, Nathan said. Every day, I am still discovering new things to love about you. The next morning brought news that would have once terrified Fiona but now filled her with joy. A letter arrived from Rose, written in her daughter's neat hand, announcing that she was engaged to a young teacher she had met at college. The wedding would be in 6 months, and Rose wanted to have it at the ranch, surrounded by family and friends. Fiona immediately threw herself into preparations, excited to help plan her daughter's wedding. She wrote long letters to Rose, discussing dresses and flowers and food, filling page after page with her thoughts and suggestions. Sometimes she paused in her writing to marvel at how natural it had become. This ability to put her thoughts on paper, to communicate across distances with nothing but pen and ink. The wedding was a beautiful affair, held on a golden autumn day with the mountains as backdrop. Rose was a radiant bride, and her groom, an earnest young man named William, clearly adored her. As Fiona watched her daughter exchange vows, she thought about her own wedding so many years ago, and she squeezed Nathan's hand. "She is so happy," Fiona whispered. "Just like her mother," Nathan whispered back. Over the following years, their family continued to grow. Rose and William had 3 children in quick succession, 2 boys and a girl. James married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and they had 4 children who loved spending time at their grandparents' ranch. Thomas eventually returned from Cheyenne with a wife and twin daughters, having found success as a newspaper illustrator, an author of a popular series of books about life in the West, illustrated with his own drawings. Fiona and Nathan settled into their roles as grandparents with enthusiasm, their house often full of children's laughter and chaos. Fiona read to her grandchildren just as she had once read to her own children, marveling at how the stories that had once been incomprehensible symbols were now old friends she could share with the next generation. On quiet evenings when the house was empty and it was just the 2 of them again, Nathan and Fiona would sit together and read, sometimes aloud to each other, sometimes silently, each absorbed in their own book, but still connected by their shared presence. These were the moments Fiona treasured most, the peaceful simplicity of being with the person she loved, doing something that had once seemed impossible. When they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Children and grandchildren came from near and far, along with friends from town, ranch neighbors, and what seemed like half of Greeley. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 90s but still sharp as ever, gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying at the same time. "When that young woman stepped off the stagecoach 41 years ago," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice still strong despite her age, "I knew she was special. And when Nathan Porter started courting her, I knew they were meant for each other. They have built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of love and family that will continue for generations. I am honored to have been part of their story." As the party continued around them, Nathan pulled Fiona aside to a quiet corner of the porch. 40 years, he marveled. "It has gone by so fast. And so slow," Fiona said. Some days I feel like that scared young woman just arrived, and other days it feels like I have been here forever." "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Leaving Boston, coming all this way, marrying a cowboy you barely knew?" "Not for a single second," Fiona said firmly. "This life, this family, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible. I am grateful every day that I had the courage to tell you the truth, and grateful that you had the patience to teach me." "You were always worth teaching," Nathan said. "Worth knowing, worth loving." They kissed, a gentle kiss that still held passion despite the years, and Fiona felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt on their wedding day. As they grew older, they spent more time reflecting on their life together, on the journey that had brought them from strangers to partners to the center of a large, loving family. Nathan's hair turned gray, then white, and his movements became slower, more careful. Fiona's hands, once so steady when forming letters on her slate, developed a slight tremor that made writing more difficult. But they adapted, supporting each other through the changes that age brought, just as they had supported each other through everything else. On a cool spring morning, when Fiona was 68 and Nathan was 71, they walked together to the creek where Nathan had first proposed. It was harder for them to make the journey now, and they had to stop several times to rest, but they were determined to reach this place that held so many memories. When they finally arrived, they sat on the bank, watching the water flow past just as it had all those decades ago. The cottonwood trees were budding, tiny leaves just beginning to unfurl, and birds sang in the branches overhead. "You remember what we talked about here?" Nathan asked. "That first time." "Every word," Fiona said. "You told me you would teach me to read. You gave me hope when I thought I had none." "You gave me hope too," Nathan said. "For a real partnership, a true companion. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living." "We gave each other those things," Fiona corrected gently. "That is what partnership means." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, watching the water, feeling the warm sun on their faces. Finally, Nathan said, "I want you to know something, Fiona. These past 46 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Every day, even the hard ones, have been better because I got to share them with you." "I feel the same way," Fiona said, tears gathering in her eyes. "You changed my life in every possible way, Nathan. You saw past my inability to read and saw the person I could become. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I could never thank you enough for that." "You thank me every day," Nathan said. "By being exactly who you are, by loving our children, by building this life with me, by being my partner in everything. That was thanks enough." They stayed by the creek until the sun was high overhead, talking about their memories, their children, their grandchildren, all the moments that had made up their life together. When they finally rose to head back to the house, they did so slowly, carefully, still holding hands just as they had that first day. The years continued their relentless march forward. Nathan's health began to decline, and Fiona nursed him through a series of illnesses with the same patience and devotion he had once shown teaching her to read. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with noise and life, bringing joy to Nathan's days. When Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, surrounded by his family, Fiona felt as though a part of her own soul had departed. They had been together for 51 years, more than half a century of partnership and love. The grief was profound, a physical ache that made it hard to breathe. But even in her grief, Fiona found comfort in their legacy. Their children were all grown and successful, good people who treated others with kindness and respect. Their grandchildren were thriving, carrying forward the values Nathan had instilled. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, and the land Nathan had loved so much would remain in the family for generations to come. In the months after Nathan's death, Fiona found herself turning to writing as a way to process her grief. She filled journal after journal with memories of their life together, stories she wanted to preserve for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wrote about the day she arrived in Greeley, terrified and certain she would be rejected. She wrote about Nathan's patient teaching, about falling in love while learning to read, about their wedding and the birth of their children. She wrote about quiet evenings on the porch and loud dinners with the whole family gathered around the table. She wrote about laughter and tears, struggles and triumphs, all the ordinary moments that had made up an extraordinary life. One afternoon, as she was writing, Rose came to visit and found her mother at the kitchen table, pen in hand, papers spread around her. "What are you working on?" Rose asked, sitting down across from her. "A record," Fiona said, "of my life with your father. I want you and your brothers to have it, and your children and their children after them. I want them to know our story." "That is a beautiful idea," Rose said. She picked up one of the completed pages and read for a moment, then looked up with tears in her eyes. "Mother, this is wonderful. You write so beautifully." "Your father taught me," Fiona said softly, "not just how to form letters and sound out words, but how to use writing to preserve what matters. He gave me that gift, and I want to pass it on." Rose reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "He loved you so much. We all could see it every day of our lives. The way he looked at you, the way he always made sure you were comfortable and happy. That is the kind of love I hope to have with William for as many years as possible." "You will," Fiona assured her. "Just remember that it takes work, patience, and a willingness to see the best in each other, even when times are hard. Your father and I were not perfect, but we were perfect for each other. We built something lasting because we were willing to put in the effort, day after day, year after year." Fiona lived for another 12 years after Nathan's death, long enough to see several of her grandchildren marry and to meet her first great-grandchildren. She remained sharp and active, continuing to write, to read, to help with the younger children's education. She became something of a legend in Greeley, the woman who had arrived as an illiterate mail-order bride and became one of the most well-read people in the county. When she finally passed away at the age of 88, peacefully in her sleep in the house she and Nathan had shared for so many years, the entire town mourned. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people, from her large extended family to friends and neighbors to students she had taught over the decades. Everyone had a story about Fiona's kindness, her wisdom, her gentle encouragement. Rose found her mother's journals in a trunk in the bedroom, dozens of them, spanning more than 5 decades. She read through them with her brothers, all of them crying and laughing at the memories their mother had preserved. The story of how Nathan had agreed to teach Fiona to read, how that had blossomed into love and partnership, was there in beautiful detail. "This should be published," Thomas said, his professional eye recognizing the quality of his mother's writing. "This is more than just family history. This is a testament to the power of education, of patience, of love. People should read this." And so, working together, the 3 siblings edited their mother's journals into a book. It was published by a small press in Denver, and while it never became a bestseller, it found an audience among teachers, literacy advocates, and anyone who believed in second chances and the transformative power of education. The title they chose was simple: "Then I'll Teach You, the story of a mail-order bride and the cowboy who loved her." On the dedication page they wrote, "For our parents Nathan and Fiona Porter, who proved that love and learning can change everything." The ranch remained in the Porter family for generations, each new group of children hearing the story of their great-great-grandmother who could not raid when she arrived in Colorado, but who had the courage to tell the truth and the determination to learn. Her journals were passed down as treasured family heirlooms, and her words continued to inspire long after she was gone. In Greeley, a small memorial was erected in the town square, recognizing both Nathan and Fiona Porter for their contributions to the community. The inscription read, Nathan Porter, 1851-1927, rancher, teacher, devoted husband and father. Fiona Garrett Porter, 1840-1928, student, writer, beloved wife and mother. Together they proved that it is never too late to learn, to love, to become who you were meant to be. And so their story ended, but also continued, rippling outward through their descendants and through everyone who read Fiona's words. It was a story of courage and kindness, of patience and perseverance, of a love that had started with a simple promise. Then I'll teach you. It was a story that belonged not just to them, but to anyone who had ever felt inadequate, anyone who had ever been afraid to reveal their truth, anyone who had ever needed someone to believe in them when they could not believe in themselves. In the end, that was Nathan and Fiona's greatest legacy. Not just the ranch or the family or even the journals, but the simple, profound truth that everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, and that love, real love, sees not just who someone is but who they can become. With patience, support, and genuine care, miracles can happen. Lives can be transformed, and two strangers who meet on a dusty street in Colorado can build something beautiful that lasts far beyond their own lifetimes, touching hearts and inspiring change for generations to come. Their story was a reminder that the Wild West was not just about gunfights and cattle drives and gold rushes. It was also about ordinary people making extraordinary choices, about building communities in harsh landscapes, about finding love and creating families in unexpected places. Nathan and Fiona Porter were heroes not because they fought outlaws or struck it rich, but because they faced their challenges with grace, treated each other with respect and devotion, and built a life that mattered. And somewhere, in the heavens above those Colorado mountains they had both loved so much, two souls walked hand in hand, still together, still learning, still loving for all eternity.